A great deal of the sickness doctors see is a direct result of the anger and misery which bubble like a poison in the human heart. The relationship between illness and the refusal to forgive is well documented in medical research. Dr. Peel told about a doctor in New York who specializes in cancer treatment. When a new patient comes to him, the first thing he does is to find out all he can about the person's background and relationships with family, co-workers, and close friends. This doctor believes that the emotional factors in a person's life play an enormous part in their susceptibility to cancer. If he can uncover a diseased relationship, he has a better chance to understand the emotional climate in which the disease took root and grew.
In fact, this physician goes so far as to summon all the members of the family to a session called the Hour of Forgiveness. At this meeting, each person is asked to be open and honest about their grievances or resentments toward the patient and towards one another. In the process, amazing revelations come to light. Often old hurts can be dismissed then and there because you find the roots were in simple misunderstandings. When everyone has put their grievance cards on the table, then it's time for forgiveness. Each person is asked to pardon the other person for any offenses, real or imagined, so that the anger can be neutralized and the healing can begin. Sometime later, the physician calls for another session with the same people. This one is called the Hour of Love. During this meeting, all the participants express their affection and concern for each other. First, forgiveness, then love, and finally, an atmosphere where healing can begin to work most effectively. The power of forgiveness is one of the most potent forces for good among all the principles of positive thinking. Dr. Peel used to tell a story about a woman who was physically healed because she learned to forgive.
A famous psychiatrist made this statement: "The teachings of Jesus are the best therapy that we have." I quoted this statement in a speech in Detroit, and afterward a local minister told me the following story of one of his parishioners. She was attending his weekly healing services, for she had developed a limp in one leg. She told the pastor that her physician could find no physiological cause for the limp. The minister, becoming curious at this situation, found that this limp began just before her daughter's marriage some months previously. It came out that this highly respectable Christian woman was carrying a virulent hatred of her son-in-law because, as she complained, he had taken the daughter away from her. It seems that the girl was an only child. The husband and father was deceased, and all I had left was my darling daughter. Therefore, she watched suspiciously every young man whom her daughter met and was able to quash every possible romance except this one, which resulted in the marriage of her daughter. Then came her removal to Grand Rapids with her husband, leaving the mother alone and seething in resentment. Meanwhile, the pastor said she continued faithfully in church attendance and otherwise seemingly was a good Christian. Finally, the pastor said, "Mary, it's my duty as your pastor to level with you. I have taken the liberty of consulting your physician, asking him if, from his point of view as a physician, whether this physical manifestation could be actually the result of your hatred." His reply was, "Certainly, that is conceivable." At this, the lady broke down and wept, saying, "Even in my prayers, God has forsaken me, as Jennifer has done." "No," said the minister kindly, "perhaps you have forsaken God. Think of the scripture in Mark 11:25. When you stand praying, forgive if you have aught against anyone. God wants to heal you. Go to him, the great physician, and forgive. Really forgive. She did as counseled. Then she went unannounced to the home of the young couple in Grand Rapids and rang the doorbell. The young husband opened the door. Mary said to him humbly, "Bill, here is your poor, sinful mother-in-law come asking your forgiveness." He put his arm around her. "Come in, Mom. I love you." At the next session of the healing service, reported the pastor, Mary was walking with no limp at all. And he added, "The gospel is, for a fact, the best therapy that we have."
Spiritual power can't pass through you if your personality is filled with resentment. Just as wood won't conduct electricity, anger and hatred won't conduct the power of spiritual healing. It's time for you to do a personal check on yourself to find out if you're harboring resentments against anyone. Ask yourself searching questions to determine just what you feel about the people in your life. When you talk about other people, do you find that your conversation is often filled with bitterness? Is it rare for you to have a good word to say about anyone? Are you always reaching for medicines to calm your stomach? When the phone rings, are you worried about who's on the other end because there are people you don't want to talk to? Have you found it's easier to blame others for your own unhappiness than it is to admit you might have been wrong too? Be honest with yourself. The answers to questions like these are an important first step in the healing process.
It's especially important that you admit your own errors and forgive yourself. Sometimes it's easier to forgive others for their thoughtlessness or insensitivity or stupidity than it is to forgive those same failings in yourself.
I have a letter here in my hand. It's from a widow who lives in La Jolla, California. I don't know her, but when I read her letter, I know her. 3 things happened to her. Her husband died. Her income was cut in 2, and she lost her home. Now, suppose that happened to you. How would you react? Your husband or your wife died. Your income was cut in 2, and you lost your home. Here's what she said. 4 months ago, my income was cut in half, so it became necessary for me to earn a living for the first time in my life. I'm 53 with no job experience, and in these times it was a challenge. Bullock's, the Los Angeles-based department store, was going to be opening a new store here in La Jolla, so I went to apply for a job. Over the section where they required the last 10 years' employment, I taped a sheet of paper saying briefly that I had not been employed but had served many organizations on a volunteer basis dealing with people, and that I was confident I could fill any position. Had the qualities of a salesman. The weeks went by and I didn't hear anything, so I stopped by the store. The personnel office had fortunately lost my application because while I waited for 2.5 hours for them to find it, someone who had been hired full-time called in and said she couldn't work, so I was hired in her place. Here's what it says, I'm in the loveliest part of the store. I have the most beautiful merchandise to sell. I am working with the nicest people. And my customers are the most patient and pleasant people. I walk with God every day, and He has been very close to me. He's blessed me with 2 beautiful children, many wonderful friends, a love of people, and an awareness and appreciation of all things. Then something else happened to me. It became necessary for me to sell my home. I couldn't afford it any longer. So I've moved into an apartment, a small one, but beautiful, a block up from the most beautiful beach in the world. Even though I'm on my feet for 8 hours a day, I share the beauties of His creation with Him. Every morning and every evening at sunset time, down by the ocean. What made the difference in this wonderful woman? She could have said, I lost my husband. I'm a widow at 53 years of age and nothing ahead of me. Everything is all washed up. Or she could have said, what do you know, my income's gone down. I only got half of what I used to have. How in the world am I going to get along on this? And then I got to give up my home where I've lived all my life. Isn't that awful? She didn't say that. She became a successful, living person because her attitudes were right. So William James had it very well said when he asserted that the greatest discovery, not only of my generation, but the greatest discovery of your life is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. Now in the book of Proverbs it says that an individual is what he thinks in his heart. Strangely enough, Dr. Kelly Andrew used that same text this morning. We never discussed it in advance, and here I am using the same text. He did it a lot better than I will. He said that something about not in your head but in your heart, so I go him one better. Mine will be more scientific. A man is what he thinks in his subconscious. And whatever you think deep within, that you are.
It all sounds reasonable and rational, but the question remains, how do you set about becoming a forgiving person? We're going to give you 6 steps Dr. Peel advised we use to tap into the power of forgiveness. The first step toward forgiveness is to resist the temptation to be judgmental. No one on earth knows all the circumstances of any situation. Leave the judgments and the retribution to God. In the Bible we read, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." If the Lord handles retribution, then your job is to practice tolerance.
The second step is to learn how to be compassionate. The best thing to do is to use your imagination. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. Ask yourself if the blame is entirely theirs, or if perhaps there is some blame on your part that has to be honestly faced. Consider what you would have done if you'd been in their situation.
Step 3. Use creative visualization to imagine your damaged relationships and see them healed. Imagine what life would be like if you were free from all the poisonous effects of resentment and anger. Think of all the hopeful things you'll accomplish with the increased energy you'll have, energy that's been wasted feeding your anger.
Step 4. Pray for the person who's offended you. When you wish good for others, that good will come back to you 1,000-fold. So in the act of forgiveness, you'll find you benefit even more than the other person.
Step 5. Practice casting grudges, jealousies, hatreds, resentments, and ill will from your mind. Replace them with happy, uplifting thoughts that will keep your outlook positive and upbeat. It's like pulling out weeds and replacing them with flowers. The resulting garden is a happier and more tranquil place to be.
And step 6. Learn to accept the imperfections in yourself and others. When others offend you, look at it as a personality flaw instead of as an act of personal aggression against you. Know that everyone on this earth has faults, and at one time or another will need forgiveness. Give, so that one day you will be able to receive. Every night, repeat the Lord's Prayer, especially the lines, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." Put the injustices of the past behind you and start the new day with a clean slate. Dr. Peel explained exactly how to forgive and forget for a positive future.
How then do we start life new every morning? First, forget yesterday. Walk away from it.
even in your own thought.